Good morning, and welcome to this Sunday service of the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We are located in Durham, North Carolina, on the ancestral lands of the Eno, the Sissipaha, Shakori, Sapani, and Lumbee people. I'm Reverend Patty Hanneman, a member of this congregation, and I will be joining you each Sunday during the month of July while the Reverends Deborah Kerr and Jacqueline Brett are taking some time to renew and refresh their spirits. It's really good to be with you this morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are from, whether you've just joined us for the first time this morning, or you're a longtime member, or anywhere in between, we are glad that you are with us today. If you are new to this community, and especially if you're visiting with us for the first time today, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat box. You'll find a link there that will help you learn more about us. And while we generally have an Inquirers class for visitors and newcomers at noon on Sundays, we will not be having that class today. Still, we hope you will join us for coffee hour that will take place directly after the service, virtually. Information on how to get to that coffee hour will appear on your screen and in the chat box at the end of the service. You can also access this information on the homepage of our website at ERUUF, that's ERUUF, ERUUF.org, in the middle of the page under events. Our guest speaker today is Yuri Yamamoto. After 2.5 years of clinical pastoral education training, Yuri now serves as the chaplain at one of our local hospitals. She has a Ph.D. in genetics from North Carolina State University and is expected to complete her Master of Divinity degree this summer at the Shaw University Divinity School. Yuri served as a pianist and as the music director for the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh from 2003 until 2018, and is now a candidate for becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister. She was also instrumental to the publication of a book entitled Unitarian Universalists of Color: Stories of Struggle, Courage, Love, and Faith. We are honored to have Yuri as our guest speaker this morning. Today's music is provided by Kate Lewis on the piano. Pam DeLavore is our cantor. Michael Fields is our worship associate. And today's tech team includes Sean Trimble and Michelle Sager. Scott Gaskins is our sound engineer. Thank you all for helping to create this morning's worship experience. And now let us center ourselves wherever you happen to be as we create this sacred space together. I invite you to take a deep breath in as you remember what it's like to be here in person as part of this beloved community, and breathe out as you release any concerns that may keep you from being fully present with us today. Taking another deep breath in and out. We begin now with our prelude. Our opening words this morning are a poem called River Call by Manish K. Mishra Marzetti. Between rocking the boat and sitting down, between stirring things up and peaceably going along,
we find ourselves here in community.
Each called from many different journeys, many different life paths, onto this river road.
Some are here because the rocking of the boat has been too much tumult, too much uncertainty, too much pain.
Some are here with questions about where the boat is going, how best to steer it, where this journey ends.
Others are here as lovers of the journey, lovers of life itself.
Here in front, beside, behind.
Each a passenger, each a captain, doing the best we can.
Rest here in your boat with me, the river calls. Listen to how I flow, the sound of life coursing all around you.
Let the current hold you. Let the current guide you. The river that gently flows through your soul whispers, "Come, let us worship."
We light our chalice this morning in celebration of Independence Day. And as we celebrate, may we also remember that this nation remains a work in progress. May this light represent a beacon of hope that the progress continues in order that all may someday be treated with dignity and respect. We invite everyone to sing our first hymn with us, "This Is My Song." The words are on your screen, so please join us as we sing this hymn together.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands of far and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Thank you, Pam and Kate. I invite us now into a deeper time of reflection and prayer with these words by Susan Manger Seal, a self-described mystic and Unitarian Universalist minister who writes from the deserts and mountains of Arizona. For those who pray and for those who don't. For those who believe there is some ultimate power that listens and can affect the world. And for those who believe that it is only through the power and love of our own hearts that we make a difference. We pray to ourselves, to each other, to God, Goddess, Spirit, the great mystery of the universe that is beyond our understanding and beyond our naming. With each of our hearts, there is a yearning for something better for ourselves, for each other, and for the world. That is our prayer. Beyond the personal prayers of our hearts, we share the collective prayers of humanity, prayers for love and justice, mercy and solace, respect, compassion, and peace. Universal prayers manifest in the values we all cherish. Prayer is the seed, the guide, the vision, the direction. But our hands must work to build a better world, and our feet must walk the paths that lead to the universal, loving, respectful human community. Let us pray, and then let us begin the work once again. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
I'm looking around the sanctuary because this is the first time I've been back here since last March. It's taking me a while to process all the emotions of being back in this spiritual home. Given that it is my first time back, I thought it would be a good time to reflect on what I have learned in these last 15 months. I titled it Humanist Reflections, not because I have anything deeply religious or profound to share with you, rather because my number one takeaway from these 15 months is that humans need humans. Last March, when we were headed into the pandemic, none of us knew what to expect. Most of us thought we would just put our lives on hold for a few weeks and then return to normal. Looking back, that thinking seems so naive, yet it reflects that for most of us, life is basically good. Now we know that what we called normal was in fact broken in many fundamental ways. And now, rather than return, we need to rebuild better. So what did I learn? I learned the importance of human contact to maintain my own sanity. Pre-COVID, I was involved in group activities basically every day of the week, activities that couldn't continue with COVID. Then, as you know, ERUUF, like basically every other institution, went virtual. Our services, coffee hour, RE, all went online in one form or another. People quickly found out that Zoom didn't mean going fast, meant sitting still for hours at a time, bracketed with your peers in a celebrity squares-like computer screen. I could see you, I could hear you, at least when you remembered to unmute yourself. But while it was functional, it was not spiritually satisfying. Online meetings don't recharge the emotional batteries the way human connections do. Another thing, singing in public, a spiritual practice for many of us, became a deadly social taboo. The Eno River singers continued to meet weekly via Zoom. We kept the flame of our shared spiritual connection burning, albeit feebly, as we would sing, in quotes, muted in our little Zoom boxes, not hearing others, and not being heard. We recorded virtual choir pieces in which our individual voices could be electronically merged and shared, but it was never the same. Having returned to live rehearsals, I know that hearing my voice blend and harmonize with the voices of others is a transformational experience. Early last year, I started a spiritual practice of each day calling a person in my life that I had fallen out of touch with. This process of reconnecting, recalling shared experiences, of exposing our mutual vulnerability in the face of the pandemic was deeply spiritual, and it reestablished for each of us that our humanity was vital to the other. It's impossible to reflect on what I have gained without addressing what I have lost. I shared a reflection with you in which I talked about names, not numbers, as the pandemic took its toll on the people I knew and loved. There were people in nursing homes passing without family present, memorial services foregone or relegated to Zoom. However, looking back, I realized I lost more friends from natural causes than from COVID. Forced to face my own mortality, I learned that while our lives seemed to stop for COVID, the cycle of life did not stop. So, when my purpose in this life is to create heaven on earth, and I've lost a year's worth of construction time, as it were, what have I learned that will enable me, in the time I have left, to make better use of the tools I have to build with? Well, I learned that humans, including myself, need humans, and this is a powerful insight. Going forward, we need to share our common humanity, our strengths, and our vulnerabilities. But most important, we need to share our compassion. Soon we will regather in this sanctuary as a congregation, but more importantly, we will each play a role in establishing the new normal, one that is less broken. Together, we will build on this earth a new normal that shares all of our many graces equitably, and we will connect in a new way that feeds back nurturing human spirituality to all. Make it so.
Today's readings come from Declaration of Independence and Frederick Douglass's speech on July 5th, 1852. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sound of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciation of tyrant, brass-fronted impudence, your shout of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. Good morning. Today is the 4th of July. What does the 4th of July mean to you? In 2010, the 4th of July was also on a Sunday. I organized a worship service on the meaning of citizenship at the UU Fellowship of Raleigh, or UUFR, and shared my reflection about becoming a U.S. citizen. At that time, my husband and I were waiting for the approval of our naturalization applications. I was uncomfortable with the patriotic tone of the oath of allegiance, especially about bearing arms on behalf of the United States when required by the law. I never felt such allegiance to my native country, Japan, because of its horrific history of imperial aggression. But I decided to accept it because this country was built on the principle of democracy and freedom. I concluded my reflection with a great hope for the democratic system and the American founding principle of equality and liberty for all. Several weeks later, we attended the naturalization ceremony with our American-born children. This was the moment of my American dream come true. When I was growing up in Japan, I was ashamed of being a Japanese because of its imperial past, as well as continuing discrimination against people from other Asian countries. I also felt suffocated by its patriarchy. When my professor suggested me to go to graduate school in this country, I was excited. I have heard so much about women's lib and freedom, and he also said that the graduate education in America was much better than the Japanese system. I married my husband, who was doing research as a visiting scientist in North Carolina, and came over in 1984. When I was in graduate school, I felt liberated. My professors were encouraging me despite my gender and poor English skills. The faculty was overwhelmingly white and male, but almost no one told me that being an Asian woman was a disadvantage. I believed that if I became a real American, I could succeed in academia. A successful career meant a permanent residency and perhaps a citizenship. Because I was in academia, I tried to speak like my professors, act like them, and think like them. I am an introvert, but I tried to be assertive, ask good questions in seminars, and look important. My hard work seemed to pay off when I received a Ph.D. But as for my academic career, I was not as successful as I had hoped for. And because of visa issues, we experienced many years of immigration nightmares and family separation. It was a huge relief when we finally became permanent residents. Permanent residency also allowed us to choose our work, and I discovered Unitarian Universalism as a hired pianist. Because I grew up in an anti-religious family, UFR was my first experience with any organized religion. It was a wonderful place for me to explore the meanings of Japanese spiritual practices and nurture my leadership skills. Most people at UFR looked real Americans to me, and with their encouragement, I felt compelled to assimilate and cater to their cultural needs. After my 4th of July reflection, the congregation gave me an applause. It felt like they were welcoming me into their country. But soon after the citizenship ceremony, things started to unravel. First, my father-in-law became terminally ill and died in May the following year. As my husband was spending time with his father in Japan, the Great East Japan earthquake with massive tsunami and nuclear disaster happened. Suddenly, I became obsessed about Japan. Then I had racial identity crisis at the General Assembly of the UUA in Charlotte. As I was listening to a Chinese American woman cry about experience of racism in her church, I identified with her stories. I realized how much my congregation's overwhelming whiteness has impacted me. I also realized that a real American to me had been white, and that I could never become one. As I volunteered in the disaster sites in Japan and spent time with my father, who became terminally ill, I reconnected with my family and old friends and made many new connections. I wrote music for many poems by a Fukushima native. I learned that I was still Japanese, even though I was also an American. I also became interested in stories about Japanese Christians. Christianity used to be a capital crime in Japan for over 200 years and is still marginalized in Japan. Their struggles with their faith resonated with me as a racial minority in this country and in Unitarian Universalism. With this new awareness about my racial identity, I could name the congregation's culture as a white supremacy. I began participating in anti-racism and diversity and inclusion activism at the church, in the denomination, and in the community. One important work I did was to co-organize and publish a collection of stories by Unitarian Universalists of Color. In my chapter, I shared my life stories, struggles in Unitarian Universalism, and my commitment to making Unitarian Universalism into a beloved community. I also joined a multicultural, multi-faith, multi-generational gospel choir led by Baha'i leaders in 2012 and became a part of a Christian racial reconciliation group and a Christian prison ministry group in 2015. People in both Christian groups often explained their commitments based on biblical verses, and I became very curious about Christianity and the Bible. I made many friends of color through the activism and now play some leadership roles in the community. I am thankful for Unitarian Universalist activists working diligently against white supremacy culture. But Unitarian Universalists have also disappointed me from time to time. In 2017, a new white male minister came to UFR. He was reluctant about anti-racism work and was dissatisfied with my involvement in it. I was often gaslighted and lost my confidence in my ability to do my work. I felt like walking on eggshells on Sunday mornings because little things would make him angry. But the mostly white congregation seemed to enjoy his charismatic presentation, and new members were joining the church. I was frustrated, but tried hard to meet his expectations. I became so anxious that I was physically sick. At that time, I was considering becoming a chaplain and going to a seminary. But my minister made very disparaging comments. One day, I decided to quit my job. I needed to shield myself from the white-dominated spaces. When I visited the Shaw University Divinity School, a historically Black Christian theological institution, I felt at home. Going to Shaw turned out to be an amazing opportunity to learn from mostly Black faculty with mostly Black student body. The curriculum is unapologetically Afrocentric and Christian, and we are encouraged to develop our own contextual theology, biblical interpretation, and activism. I found the Bible fascinating, an amazing collection of books, and enjoyed learning about liberation theologies and practices around the world. I have felt supported as an Asian American Unitarian Universalist Christian to explore my own context and also invited into predominantly Black spaces. I was able to research and write about Japanese liberation theologians' works in conversation with Black theologians. To complement my Afrocentric seminary study, I participated in a 10-month Progressive Asian American Christian Fellowship and used their materials for an independent study for deeper reflection and developing my own activism involving both African Americans and Asian Americans. Chaplain training, called Clinical Pastoral Education, has also helped me learn about myself, articulate my theology, and practice spiritual care. I remembered many painful memories in my life and turned them into the source of my compassion. Meeting many different types of people at their most vulnerable moments let me see the humanity in all people, including white men. I also observed how injustices manifested in the healthcare system. I found the power of prayers through praying for my patients, their loved ones, and the staff. I developed my pastoral identity from Japanese Buddhist and Shinto stories, as well as the Christian faith, and integrated my musical and artistic gifts into chaplain practice. In the last 11 years, I learned that the United States of America was not the dream democratic nation I once imagined it to be. This nation was built on a racist, classist, and sexist foundation and has been an empire on its own right. People who look like me have been coming to this land since 1500s, and they were often treated as cheap, disposable labor, vilified and excluded. Due to racist immigration laws, Asian immigrants were not allowed to become a citizen and own property for many decades. After the Japanese Navy attacked Pearl Harbor, 120,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans were ordered to live in remote concentration camps. In those camps, they were asked to answer a loyalty questionnaire that included questions very similar to the Oath of Allegiance. For young American-born Japanese American men, answering yes meant being drafted into a segregated combat team. They fought courageously in the European front to show their loyalty, while their families remained incarcerated against the Constitution. The team is the most decorated unit for its size and length of service in the entire history of the U.S. military. Some men also served as Japanese interpreters in a Pacific theater. When they came home, though, some of their white neighbors did not welcome them home. Today, Asians are the fastest growing immigrant group, and anti-Asian sentiments and violence have persisted and increased during the COVID pandemic. At the same time, there are the sentiments of anti-Blackness among Asian communities. On the other side of the Pacific, American gunboat diplomacy in 1852 pushed my ancestors to internalize white supremacy and become an imperial colonizer under the slogan of "Leave Asia, Enter Europe." It really sounds like an internalized white supremacy, isn't it? The President Theodore Roosevelt actually wanted Japan to play the role in the Monroe Doctrine of Asia, and what the Japanese did in Korea and other countries were reminiscent of what European colonists did to Native people in America. I learned how dominant Christianity has upheld white supremacy, patriarchy, homophobia, and other forms of oppression for millennia, and also how Christianity inspired the marginalized to fight back. I also learned how Unitarian Universalists and our predecessors have participated in the oppression of others. A common notion that Unitarian Universalists have always been on the side of justice is simply not true. Wealthy American opium traders, such as Warren Delano, the maternal grandfather of Franklin Roosevelt, were Unitarians. Many Unitarians, including the President Millard Fillmore, who signed the Fugitive Slave Act into law in 1850, supported slavery, if not owned or traded slaves themselves. Abolitionists such as Theodore Parker and Olympia Brown still expressed white supremacy sentiments. And Unitarians heavily promoted eugenics at the turn of the 20th century as scientific salvation. These facts are not widely known among Unitarian Universalists, but to the UUA's credit, many of the information are available in the UUA website or in Mark Harris's book, Elite: Uncovering Classism in Unitarian Universalist History. When I began learning about the troubling part of Unitarian Universalist legacy, I felt cheated and angry. I actually wanted to run away. But I also recognize that there are probably very few organizations in this nation that had absolutely no speck in its history. Finding and joining the perfect organization doesn't really prove me as a good person either. Learning, accepting, and speaking the difficult truth and doing something about it today makes me a better person. Understanding the dynamic forces that continue to impact and form me from the past and present helps me grow and see the path I must take. I recently found an article from the UU World in 2008 and related stories about the UUA committee that worked on truth, repair, and reconciliation. One of the stories was about David Petit, a late white UU minister who had reached out to a descendant of an enslaved African owned by his slave trader ancestor. Some congregations were also engaged in the work. I couldn't find any recent activity, and some resources links no longer work. But the work of truth, repair, and reconciliation does not end when a committee submits a report. Have you been actively engaged in such work personally? When I read my reflection from 2010, I cringe. But it was who I was then. I can see that I have struggled and grown since. The key to my growth has been personal crisis and the new relationships I built as a result. People with many different identities helped me see the world in different ways. Some of them look like me, and others look very different from me. They taught me with compassion and patience. If I can be as compassionate and patient toward who I used to be as these friends were to me, I can meet others where they are with compassion and patience. I know that this congregation has been doing the important work of building relationships across differences for years. Continue building bridges, transform and be transformed, and let's bend the arc of moral universe toward justice. Amen, and blessed be.
Thank you, Yuri, for your story and for reminding us of the work that still needs to be done, both in this nation and in our movement as Unitarian Universalists. Now is the time we help live up to our promise of being a vibrant faith community through our financial support. If you wish to make a contribution this morning, you can find a link in the chat box that will allow you to do so. We will now take up this morning's offering. Thank you, Kate. It was beautiful. And thanks to all of you who were able to make a financial contribution this morning. We are very grateful. And I'm also grateful for all of the people here this morning that have helped make this worship service so incredibly special, including those of you who have joined us in your homes or wherever you are. It takes all of us to weave this beloved community together and keep it strong. Thank you. Our closing hymn this morning is Far Too Long by Fear Divided. The words again are on your screen, so we invite you to join us as we sing this hymn.
Far too long by fear divided, we have settled with the sword quarrels which should be decided by the reconciling word. Now the nations are united, though as yet in name alone, and the distant goal is sighted, which the prophet souls have shown. May at last we cease from warring, barriers of hate remove, and earth's riches freely sharing, found the dynasty of love.
These closing words by Alicia Ford. When we pause to remember who we are, companions on this grand experiment called life, when we take a moment to shed the ways we have been carefully taught to lead from fear, to punish the poor, to persecute those who don't look like we do, to deny rights to those who love, to believe that we are separate, that some people are superior to others. When we take a moment to shed all of that and hear one another's stories, then we are living into the promise of building the world that we dream about. In this spirit, we commit. In this spirit, we have gathered. Go in peace, my friends.